The Curate by Thomas Baxter. A town, anywhere in England, now. It isn't any particular feature, because there are no particular features to speak of, but it was a sense of the whole that made this town feel wretched. Not awful or dangerous, just failing and slowly dying. Its case was not helped on this cold, damp November evening that was slowly slipping from grey, damp day to bleak, black night. By the wind, squally and cold, moving the damp air around, engulfing anyone who dared be out on this dark, desolate night. The town has nothing going for it. It is not quaint, it has no claim to fame, no pretty village green, no river for picnics on hot summer days, no open space for bonfires, no pretty autumn walks, no theatre, no cinema, no jobs, no hope. Nothing happens, and nobody notices nothing happening, for years that turn to decades, and decades that turn to centuries. From its first settlements in the Middle Ages through the Industrial Revolution and the mining boom, which gave the town a brief moment of hope, when jobs were plentiful and money was spent. But it was a brief moment when the sun began to shine. Now, again, with the decline of the coal mining, the town slipped back into its hiding place, where it will, in all probability, stay again, hidden, not noticed for more centuries. The people who live and work in this town, like all the invisible people in all the invisible towns, are born, get married, have children, go to work, pay their taxes. They live and they die, and nobody notices. Its Main Street, or High Street as it is called, has long ago lost any pretences it had of being a busy, bustling high street, and resorted to building societies, charity shops, and a few coffee shops, frequented mainly by people who remembered the way they thought the town used to be, but probably, in all honesty, wasn't. Now the shutters are all down and you can't tell which shops are still used and which have been closed for years. As we walk through this town on this evening of a miserable winter's night, the streets are dank and empty, and every soul who inhabited this town during the day has left now and gone home. The town had been closed and packed away for another day. All that was left open was a pub at the top of the high street, haunted at this time of night by the souls of the town who had long ago given up trying, and settled on this, their place to shine amongst all the others, who shine in the bright lights of alcohol. Down the street, past the war memorial to the boys who left and did not return. The only heroes in this town, like so many, are the dead ones. The shops past here are all closed, some for the night, but most forever, until someone turns them into flats for people who can't afford to live anywhere else. The only life comes from the fish and chip shop. Customers are few. An old lady treating herself to a warm supper, and a couple of excitable youths high on hope and the belief that they will rock the world. In reality, in 2 years they will be rocking cradles. Towards the end of the high street you will see the church. There is no doubt it is in need of some work, but it has been standing there since the first settlement, with small parts added on as the town and the congregation grew. It is set in a large graveyard with few gravestones now standing, but the softness of the turf below your feet lets you know where generations of townsfolk now dwell. The church is lit by the dim light of 3 light bulbs, and inside each evening the curate prepares the books for evensong. It is not a long job, as he expects few to attend, but a job he enjoys. He is relatively new to the town, and lives in the vicarage next door, a house too small now for the vicar, who got married and needed more space. The curate is about 25. He is dressed every day in the uniform of a religious man, a shapeless but comfortable grey suit that matches his complexion. The vicarage itself was built when vicars did not get married and lived alone, with only the help of a housekeeper. A Victorian house, with tall, spiralling chimneys high above its roof. Central heating had been installed many years ago and did not work as it should. The curate himself found he on most evenings gravitated to one room in the vicarage. That long ago would have been the dining room, but it had now been opened up into a kitchen, creating a large open-plan space with a large fire at one end and what would have been a range at the other, but was now an electric cooker and a microwave on a table at the side. He would light the fire after lunch, and so by the time he got back after evensong, the room would be warm to eat and work. He spent most evenings in this room. He was not the best cook. Baked beans on toast was his usual go-to. Thick bread, butter, warm beans, and then more butter on top and a cup of tea. His calling, if you like, to the church, had been to help. In man's darkest hour, it is to God we talk, and in days gone by the church door was always open. This, of course, is no longer the norm, and churches are mostly locked when not in use. But he had, with the use of a little camera focused on the door, managed, without actually getting permission, to keep the church door open, so anybody who wanted to enter could. You would be surprised how many actually came in, mostly the young and the bored, daring each other with stories of ghostly town residents. He always found that a flicker of the lights and a door opening would soon move them along. Occasionally, the door would open and somebody from the town would be looking for help, or forgiveness, or both, or just to find reassurance, something solid to hold on to when their world was shifting. But it was the lost souls who entered and needed help that he left the door open for. These were the ones who needed him, and so it was tonight. He returned to his room after evensong and to his supper of baked beans. Afterwards, he sat for a moment by the fire before starting his work again. It is here that we find him now. It is 8:30. A flicker on the camera caught his eye and he stood to take a closer look. A man was sitting at the back of the church. He picked up 2 coins, turned on a small light inside the church as he went. He entered through the door at the bottom. The man was seated, looking up at him, but did not make any form of greeting. "A cold night," said the curate, getting closer. "Is everything okay?" "I needed a moment," replied the man. "That's fine, as long as you need. I'll be just at the back here sorting these books. They do tend to get an awful mess. I don't know how, they're hardly used now. I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, I just felt I needed a quiet moment or two, you know," said the man before the curate had finished talking. The curate sat on the pew the other side of the aisle. "Yes, I understand. This is the perfect place. Take as long as you want." The man smiled. "I've had some of the happiest and saddest times of my life in this church, you know." The curate knew. It was his job to say nothing, but just be there. "It was down there. Nearly 60 years ago I married my wife. And 5 years before that when I met her in the hall behind. Of course, you won't remember that. It was closed years ago and now long gone. She was beautiful. To me, anyway. We were only 15 at the time. Just left school. She'd got a job at the co-op, just across the road from here. Another thing long gone. Along with the pit where I was working. You just fall into jobs, and just tend to stick with them. It's not what you want from life, but it's... well, I suppose. It's what's expected of you. And you just carry on. Day in, day out. And it turns into... well, it's your life, I suppose. It's so sad. So sad. Quietly he sat for a moment, and the curate moved pews to be closer. "I lost her 3 years ago. I've never really got used to living alone. The children helped where they could, of course, but no matter how much they want to do, they can't help all the time. They've got jobs and families. They were both christened here. That's over 50 years ago. He stared towards the altar and the font at the left-hand side. Life passes by, doesn't it? They both sat for a few minutes, looking at the font, before he began again. The happiest days of your life aren't the ones you expect them to be. They're the ones you don't know. The ones you just miss. Until later, when you look back. My dad told me once. Make the most of things because you don't know when the last time you'll do something will be. Of course, like all children, I didn't really take much notice. But he was right. I can't remember so many last times. The last time I held my wife's hand. The last time I picked up my children. Or the last time I ran. The curate touched his arm, a faint quiver of recognition that a fellow being was with him, and knew. The curate knew it was his job to know. It was what he had been sent for. You know, said the curate, it's fine sometimes to let go. I know, said the man sitting before him, but I'm not ready just yet. With a slight smile, the curate stood saying, Nobody is. He slowly moved away, leaving the man to his thoughts. He busied himself with books and candles, tidying and moving them around, although they didn't really need it. And then, in the dim light of this winter night, he felt the dark soul beside him. He turned, smiled, and took his hand. Slowly they walked together towards the door at the back of the altar, hidden to most by the church pillars. As they reached the door, he turned to the man, took the 2 coins slowly from his pocket, and placed them into the man's hand, folding it slightly and holding it softly. He smiled, a smile of warm comfort, and opened the door and told him it was time. And with that, somewhere, in a bedroom on the other side of this town surrounded by his loved ones, another soul quietly left. The end.